In the several years I've been making review and first impression type videos, there are very few games I've flip-flopped on more than this one. Today we are once again taking a look at a game by the admittedly rather straightforward name of Bigfoot, formerly known as Finding Bigfoot, before the developer had to, amusingly enough, drop the name due to a cease and desist legal letter from Animal Planet and Discovery, of all people. So instead, for a while now, it's just been Bigfoot. Some of my veteran subscribers, those of you who have been following what I do here for the past few years, will probably recall that I've historically had a series of really negative interactions with members of this particular development team, for what I think really any other rational person would probably agree are pretty stupid reasons. The abbreviated version of events is that I've had a bit of a back and forth beef with the Bigfoot team over some mild criticism of the game during its earlier days, but despite our seemingly mutual dislike, I have to give them credit. They've stuck with this game for far longer than I ever anticipated they would. Over the course of these 4 major updates, we've seen 4 maps added to the game at one point or another, but weirdly enough, while each major release has so far brought with it one new map, every time a new major update releases, the previous map is removed from the game. While it does make sense to say that obviously with the developers continuing to increase the visual quality of these maps with each new release, older maps will need to be reworked to some extent to beautify them so they can rival the quality of the newer maps, I think most players would agree with me here that it's arguably better to just keep all the maps in there and just alter them over time, rather than yank them all out of the game only to then slowly trickle them back in one at a time. It's basically the same excuse that Bungie gave us not that long ago when Destiny 2 players were understandably outraged when the developer announced that more than half the game's worlds, quests, side activities, etc. would all be snapped out of existence so they could be reworked. Now, for an early access game whose developers have proven that they're actually capable of making better looking maps over time, I'm willing to cut them a little slack. But if you're going to only have just one map in the game currently, it better provide a mind-blowing experience. As ever, I'll be perfectly honest, what we've got here is admittedly a very good looking and functionally fleshed out map, which I'll give the developers credit for. I played about half a dozen matches on it, 4 of which I've played as a hunter, and 2 of which I played as Bigfoot, because that's a thing now, unlike in prior updates. Players now have the option of playing as Bigfoot in a PvP setting, not just a PvE one. I've seen a lot of comparisons being made between this PvP Bigfoot mode and Dead by Daylight, but after putting in a few hours myself, I don't find this comparison to have any meaningful weight behind it. While there is a passing resemblance on the mere surface level due to the asymmetrical 4v1 multiplayer structure, that's more or less where the comparison ends. While Dead by Daylight is structured around one player-controlled monster actively hunting a team of survivors, while the survivors work together to try to complete various objectives in order to unlock a special exit and escape alive, Bigfoot's metagame, if you will, is effectively the opposite, at least in theory, with the players actively hunting Bigfoot while Bigfoot attempts to stay out of their reach and gradually take them out one by one, as opposed to dealing with the players as a group. As Bigfoot, you basically attack, hopefully take out or at least injure a hunter using your special cooldown abilities, retreat once the hunters deal a bit of damage, and run around trying to find food to recover at least some of your lost health before attacking the human skin. You know what this game actually resembles? To me, Evolve. A lot of the gameplay when you're playing as Bigfoot revolves strongly around cooldown management. You can't just spam the same attacks over and over again, and the gameplay flow kind of really forces you to strike quick and get out fast. The problem is, Evolve did this in a way that was kind of fun and balanced risk and reward fairly equally, something Bigfoot tends to struggle with. The hunters here in Bigfoot never really have an opportunity to hunt, despite the fact that this is clearly how the game was meant to be played. You're never really on the offensive, which you'd assume as hunters you naturally would be. Instead, you're kind of on the defensive. And while sometimes it's true that the best offense is good defense, that doesn't mean it's necessarily the most fun way to play. Speaking of things that aren't really super fun, I should note that while we overall had a pretty good time playing both the PvE and PvP modes, one of the criticisms that we still maintain is that the game still suffers from a overall lack of impact in many ways. And you might be wondering, rightfully, what I mean by that. First of all sounds of weapons firing in the game, as well as sounds of slicing with the knife, don't really sound like they're supposed to. It definitely doesn't help that the weapon animations are somewhat questionable as well. The way the knife is animated in particular strikes me as really lazy. A knife can be a great close-range weapon or utility in many instances, and lots of games have found various ways of making knives interesting to use. You can stab with them, you can throw them, you can pry open a locked door with them, you can mark your trail by carving into trees, you could saw off branches to create impromptu campfires, and these are just a few things I would myself consider using a knife for, in the event that me and my friends somehow decide to go hunting a mythical half-human, half-gorilla abomination through the Washington State Forest, though I'm not sure why we'd ever do that because we're not insane. And here the game doesn't allow you to do any of that, which is a pity because I really think doubling down on the more survival-esque aspects while keeping the combat as it is now, aside from maybe continuing to make improvements to the Bigfoot AI, would all result in a far more engaging and replayable survival horror experience. Over the years, the game has come a remarkable way in terms of improving the basic horror component, as well as adding more value to the multiplayer side of things. But in my opinion, it's the survival mechanics that feel like they should be next in line for a bit of refining and expansion. The new winter-themed map is a decent sizable addition. As far as aesthetics, it's pretty enough, and there are certainly enough points of interest scattered around to keep things interesting and to give players lots of opportunities to set up a good defensible position if the insufferable snowman comes running and roaring at you, giving you little time to organize yourselves. But at least for me and my group, it wasn't the map itself or its points of interest that got our attention, although we did enjoy the double entendre when we stumbled into a cave labeled Plato's Cave. Clearly, the developers at some point had to take Philosophy 101 at university, and as a fellow student myself, I can appreciate that. But no, the thing that we most enjoyed in this 4.1 update, or things rather, were the new gameplay mechanics, which include a new zipline feature where players can zipline across whole sections of the map either from high to low ground, or, amusingly enough, from low ground to high ground. And realistically as that sounds, it was both funny and fun, so I can't say I mind. Other new mechanics include a way of resurrecting dead teammates by collecting Bigfoot's ritual skulls and bringing them, along with the teammate's dead body, back to a specific altar. But placing all the skulls does seem to tick off Bigfoot, so I wouldn't do it unless you actually have to. The developers also added a new win condition for players, where if you collect enough substantial evidence of Bigfoot's existence, like taking photos of his footprints, photographing his victims, and other pieces of evidence, you can leave without actually having to eliminate him, which is a nice alternative option. Personally, I'd only go that route myself if the rest of my team were already dead, and we already had enough evidence. Similar to my mentality while playing Phasmophobia, I'd prefer a clean win the normal way, but hey, if the rest of my team is dead and our success or failure is riding on me alone, you can definitely take the option B in this scenario. Until the developers stop screwing around and just give people access to all the maps instead of only restricting it to only one or two at a time, I can't fully recommend the game per se, but if you already own it, now's not a bad opportunity to jump back in and play the new content. For everybody else, just wait another 4 or 5 years for the developers to add back in all the old maps or whatever revised versions of those maps they've been making, so we have a complete game. This game came out in 2017, it's now almost 2022. I don't think it would be an exaggeration for me to say I don't expect the game to exit early access anytime soon. But that said, I'll be very happy to be ultimately proved wrong. On that note though, that's where I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. I feel like I could go on in far greater detail, but conversely, I think I covered all the important points I wanted to touch on today. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, please be sure to give this video a like, share it around, and definitely let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you want to support the work I do in the channel, subscribing and clicking the bell to opt into getting all notifications would really help. This is Warrior Dan signing out. Stay awesome everybody, stay safe, and peace out.